Hello. Today's topic is tariffs and the US economy. Before getting started, we'll understand what are tariffs and how are they impacting the stock markets and the inflation. What are tariffs? Tariffs are the extra taxes imposed on the imported goods. Let us understand by an example. Now, if US is importing mangoes from India and the market price is around $100. Now US will add or impose some tariff on these mangoes, and now the final price would be $118. So after adding the tariffs, the price has gone up from $100 to $118. So there is a price rise. So what happens when the cost is raised? Consumption decreases as the cost is increasing. So the consumers will buy lesser quantity of mangoes, or they'll not prefer the mangoes which have a higher price. So this will affect the Indian exports or the Indian markets. This is about tariff. N. Next, coming to what is the impact on the stock markets due to this tariffs. Stock markets generally represent how business are reacting in that particular economy. So when we take about big techs like Apple, Meta, etc., they earn globally and their earnings are internationally spread. So they can absorb the shocks of tariff very well, and they have very negligible impact of the tariffs. But whereas we take a small business, they are dependent on transportation, manufacturing, raw materials, etc., and many other factors. So if a manufacturer needs raw materials that are to be supplied from India or any Asian country, due to the import tariffs, the raw material will be costlier, because the raw material cost with the tariffs will have a higher price than the previous price. So as raw material price increases, there will be increase in the production price. As the production cost is increasing, the final price will also be increased, and that will be borne by the consumer at the end. So as the raw material price increases, indirectly the consumption decreases and the demand also decreases because of the final price rise. So this will impact the small business in the US. So the business health would go down for small business or medium business manufacturers, and that's how the stock markets are impacted. Then we'll move on to how it is impacting the inflation. So as we see, tariffs are making the import costs higher and higher. So when the import costs are higher, the production costs are higher. Example, we have taken the raw materials example. So when imports are higher, the higher production cost, and higher production cost will be bought by the consumer. So there is higher consumer prices. So everyday goods prices will be increasing. So this is called as inflation. There is an inflation indicator called personal consumption expenditure PCE by the US, and it is seen that it has been stably growing at the rate greater than 2%. So 2% is their limit for this particular indicator, and it has been more than 2% for a very long time. So this is how tariffs are impacting the inflation. And then we move on to monetary policy. As RBI is responsible for monetary policy in India, Fed is responsible for monetary policy in US. So, as we know, when there is inflation, RBI increases the rates to cut down the liquidity. To support growth, RBI cuts the rate so that there will be a growth in the economy. So in the same way, Fed is trying to cut the rates for the growth in economy. When RBI cuts the rates, there will be more spending, because people can spend more as they are paying less interest on loans and everyday goods. So they'll have more money with them. When they have more money, they'll spend more, and that will lead to growth in the economy. So that is why Fed is trying to cut the rates for the growth in the economy. But as tariffs are increased, so as we see here in the same thing, as tariffs are increasing, the import costs are more, production costs are more, and high consumer prices are more, and the inflation is coming back again. So when the inflation is again rising, we should not cut down the rates, we have to keep the rates tighter. So but tariffs are increasing the inflation, there are no rate cuts. So When there are no rate cuts, the growth will be slower again. So this monetary policy is becoming complicated due to the tariffs. And what is the global effect of the tariffs? When we see the 90% of world trade is done in dollars and 60% of foreign reserves is also in dollars. So as the tariffs and things are all in dollars, it creates a strong dollar. So when it is a strong dollar, the American exports will be very powerful and they'll be very much costlier than the previous one. That will have an indirect impact on the US manufacturers because the dollar strength is more than the local currency and they'll be more costlier. So people will not prefer to buy the costly goods, and so that will eventually impact the US manufacturers in the long run. So this tariffs is mainly to encourage the buy local motto, because it is mainly to slowly ban the foreign goods and give preference to the local made goods. That is why they are imposing tariffs on the foreign goods, so that they are a bit costlier than the local goods. But though it is having a good motto to buy local, but this is eventually increasing the inflation, and also this whoever have the dependence of imports like raw materials, etc., those small business and medium scale businesses, they'll be down because of the higher material cost. And also the monetary policy is fluctuated and they're not able to take a good decision on it. And also we have a global effect and on the stock markets. So this is about tariffs and the US market. Thank you.